when you get stuck, when you get into a reaction, when you get into a mental state, right, and it's wanting you to say something or wanting you to do something, you know, you feel threatened, you feel angry, you feel scared, whatever the case may be. If instead of just following what it's compelling you to say or do, you just pay attention to the thoughts and the feelings and the sensations and the perception, you pay attention to it, but you give yourself some time not to do anything. Just give yourself some time to watch the experience of it. Many times what will happen is it'll pass, and then you no longer feel compelled to do anything. Right? So that's a lesson to be learned about how to manage experience, you know, how to understand experience, and to understand that, you know, the idea of impermanence is a law. It's generally understood in a negative way, that everything, you know, everything is impermanent, so you can't keep anything. You can't hold on to anything. Everything keeps changing no matter what you do to try and control it. You can't control it. Everything keeps changing. Well, that's looked at in a negative way, but it's also can be seen in a positive way, like a lot of the Jewish people say, this too shall pass. Yeah, they're looking at impermanence in a positive way, that nothing ever stays the same. So, you know, don't, because if you understand that, then maybe the wisdom, the application of wisdom is to simply be with what's happening instead of feel compelled to get involved. To just be present to it, be available to it, instead of feeling compelled to do something. You know, to just allow yourself to witness. And, you know, that's an opportunity for you to experience your true nature, right? Because that's just like the awareness is. You know, the awareness doesn't move, doesn't change ever. It's always available, right? So that's why the practices, whether it's meditation or a lot of the other kinds of practices that come from the traditions, the practices are designed to help you to experience the way you really are, and to help you to experience the way it really is, so that you can come out of the spell, that you can break the spell. It seems to me, you know, because this is my whole focus in life, is to keep trying to see this as clearly as possible, and see it in a way that it can be communicated, so that the communication in and of itself is not the thing that's going to cause a wake-up for anybody, right? But the communication may provide a gestalt, it may provide a pattern, right, of understanding, right? That if you keep going at it and you keep getting different kinds of understandings that are all parts of this, right, reality, right? That at some point you may have enough pieces of the puzzle in place that you see the picture. You see what I'm saying? That you see what the puzzle is. And that's an awakening, you know, that's now you see, it's an aha moment, it's an it's like, you know, even for those of you who say, you know, there's a lot of this I don't really understand, you know, it seems abstract, I'm not sure what it means, like that. Well, don't worry about that, you know. Pay attention to what you do understand, right? There's obviously something you do understand here, right? Let those pieces of the puzzle be there, right? And then with those pieces of the puzzle, with that understanding, keep paying attention to what you don't understand, but don't just put it aside. See, what people do is they say, I don't understand it, and so I'm not going to think about it, I'm just going to put it aside, I don't understand it. And then some people make it even worse, and they say, you're confusing me, you know, or it's beyond me, you know, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not awake enough, or whatever the case may be, right? None of that is the case. If you just keep at it, if you keep practicing anything, if you keep studying anything, it will begin to reveal itself to you. Is it not true? Look at anything in your life that you did a lot of, that you did consistently, that you did over time. You know, from the very beginning of doing that to where it started to go, you started to see more distinctions about what you were doing that you didn't see in the beginning. You know, it started to become more known to you, you could start to see more of how it goes. You know, anything that you do in life. I remember when I first started to play tennis when I was a kid, I didn't know about anything to play tennis. I got a $4 tennis racket and $2 tennis balls, and, you know, went to the high school and started banging these balls against the wall, you know. And, you know, when I looked at people doing it, that's what I saw them doing. So I figured if I do that, I'm playing tennis. Lo and behold, you know, I was fortunate that I worked at a movie theater as an usher. The owner of the theater was a professional tennis player. And he saw me fooling around with a tennis racket, right? So he called me out of the movie theater one night, out in front of the movie theater, and he said, "You interested in playing tennis, kid?" And I said, yeah. He said, "Okay, come over here." And he went behind the counter and pulled out a tennis racket and gave me the most expensive tennis racket you could buy. Wow. I will never forget, it was called the Jack Kramer Wilson racket with catgut. You know, they don't even make catgut anymore, right? Yeah. So now I had a great tennis racket, right? And then he kept calling me outside in front of the tennis theater, and he said, "Now, I'm going to hand you the racket. I want you to take the grip like you're going to shake hands with it." And he's showing me how to hold the racket. There's a specific way to hold the racket. I didn't know that. You know, and then he showed me a lot, you know, he kept showing me all these different things, how to play tennis, right? So I started practicing what he was showing me, right? Well, 10 years later, I was a tennis player, a competitive tennis player. And I understood things about the game that were very fine points, you know, about how to play a point, you know, all the details, right? So it got filled in, right? In the same way, if you're, you know, when you go to the dentist, right, and he's looking into your mouth, what he sees when he's looking, if you were to look in your mouth, you wouldn't see any of what he sees, right? He sees a whole world in there that you don't see, right? But he went to school to learn about all the details of what's going on in your mouth, right? So in the same way with this, right, if you just keep getting the distinctions, you know, you have a distinction. You have a distinction about who you are, right? The distinction about who you are is you're not who you think you are. That's a distinction, right? So you keep getting these distinctions, right? And they keep being pieces of a puzzle. And that's what I try and do here when I say, if you think that you're the thinker of your thoughts, look into it. Look at the details. Is that true that you're the thinker of your thoughts? If you actually slow down and look at it and see that, wait a minute, I've always lived my life like I'm the voice in my head. I'm the thinker of my thoughts. If I slow down and look at that and say, wait a minute, when I look to see what I think, I have to look at what a voice in my head says. But if it's me, why do I do that? If I'm the thinker of those thoughts, why do I have to do that? Then you realize, well, you made a mistake. Well, look and when you realize you made that mistake, look at the difference it makes to know that you're not the thinker of your thoughts. Look at the difference that it makes, that you're not the thinker of your thoughts. Look at the difference that it makes when you realize that emotions just happen to you. You're not feeling them. See, the way it gets put together in the person's psychological understanding, something happens, and it causes me to feel this way. And when I feel this way, then I have to do something, you know, to deal with what's happening, right? That's another misunderstanding. If you slow down and you really look at that the way the psychologists did when they studied human behavior, you would realize that's not what's happening. That's not what happened. Your feelings are being stimulated, and the stimulation of those emotions is a stimulation that causes things from your past to come up and replay again in your brain, and you think that's what's happening. This is, you know, one of the things that makes today different, and one of the reasons the Dalai Lama meets with psychologists and physicists every year to have conversations, to share information, right, is because science can now get involved in looking at these things in a way that the ancient people couldn't do. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have CAT scans. They didn't have the stuff that we have now. They didn't have the understandings we have scientifically now. So now you can look at these things, and the scientific understandings back up what was understood as a direct perception of the truth, but without the actual evidence, right? But now there's the actual evidence. Even when we talk about reality, you know, back in the days of Buddha, you know, they had understandings about the nature of reality that came out of the direct experience that people had through meditation and so forth, right? And through being awake and looking at the world and just seeing it as it actually is, right? But now we have understandings that come from quantum physics that say the same thing, that actually backs up what people thousands of years ago already were seeing. And this is why the Dalai Lama wants to meet with these people every year, because he's saying, you guys got proof now. You know, that's why when he met Richie Davidson, right, he said, you know, why don't you go back and use your understandings to create scientific valid teachings and scientific valid foundations that can prove without a question of doubt at all about what we're saying, so that people can start to benefit more from these teachings, because now you can tell them this is science, it's not just spirituality. And that obviously Richie Davidson took his advice and did that, and he was very successful with it. And so that was a big contribution to humanity, you know, to say that science is now saying something that is totally consistent with ancient wisdom understandings. So the validity of it is more real now. And if that's the case, then it lends itself to people being willing to look into it and see, well, maybe there's something, maybe I got something wrong here, like Paul Hederman said at some point. And this is a place that you've got to get to with these practices and teachings. At some point, you have to get to a point where you say, maybe I am not who I thought I was. Maybe that's the problem. See, because if that's the problem, that takes you out of a whole psychological and emotional world of understanding and puts you into a completely different possibility in terms of understanding what's going on. Completely different possibility of understanding what's going on. And in that complete different possibility, some of the ancient teachings make a lot of sense, you know, like what you are is unconditional love. You know, in the ordinary way of understanding that, that's poetic, isn't it? You know. People listen to that, oh, that's sweet, that's touching, that it's touching. I want to try and be like that. But in these understandings, that's a fact, Jack. In these understandings, that's not some poetic model for your behavior, no. In these understandings, that's actually the truth about what you are. And if you get that that's actually the truth about what you are, you ought to be passionate about realizing it. You ought to be passionate about experiencing it, so you could actually have the experience of seeing what does the world look like from unconditional love. You know? What if you could take off the glasses and look at the world, you know, with complete unadulterated acceptance. Complete acceptance, seeing everything is the way it is. Everything is the way it is. That's it. That's the beginning and the end. Everything is the way it is. That's all. Everything is the way it is. That's the truth. There's nothing deep about that. Everything is the way it is. Well, why is life so difficult? Because you think it should be different, don't you? Yeah. Yes, you think it should be different. So you're not in relationship to reality. You're not in relationship to life. You're in relationship to your ideas about life. You're in relationship to your judgments and evaluations about life. Of course, you caught that bad habit from the rest of humanity, you know? You got that bad habit from the people that were there when you were born. You were born into a tribe that believed all that shit, right? So you had no choice. You couldn't believe something else. You were a child, right? And then you're a child and you grow up and you continue to have the beliefs you had as a child, and now you're trying to have those beliefs work in terms of how you're going to deal with other people and how you're going to live your life. You've got childish misunderstandings that you're trying to use to live an adult life. And if you look at human behavior, if you look at adults behaving, it's not hard to see how childish it is. Even if you look at world leaders, you can look at world leaders and see how childish it is, right? Don't you bring those missiles to Ukraine. If you do that, we're gonna get you. These are kids. These are kids talking with bombs and weapons that could destroy everybody.